this is Sully, Jones, and Johnson, and we are all together today for a very special Christmas episode. We hope today you are all sitting around a nice fire with your tree going, listening to true crime. So, we hope you enjoy this special, and it's going to be presented by Jones. But if you want to find us on social media and go look at pictures or go see other episodes that we have done, we are on Facebook as Kitchen Table Research Podcast. We are on Instagram under kitchen.table.research, and our Gmail is kitchen.table.research@gmail.com. Our link to our website is in all of our bios. I also have been doing Darlie videos on TikTok, and my handle there is at design and true crime. So go catch up on me remodeling my house, and also I've been doing some videos with Darlie, and we have a very special finale for Darlie coming up shortly. So I will go ahead and we do have one subscriber, right, Johnson? And that is Rita's Relics.
Yes, thank you, Rita.
Thank you,
Sorry it
Rita.
took a minute,
I
but
know it's been a
here you
minute.
go. Merry Christmas, Happy
Merry
Hanukkah,
Christmas.
Kwanzaa, all the other stuff.
And to all of our other fans out there, thank you guys for listening this year. I've broken down the math, and we've streamed roughly around 30,000 people. So that's really exciting for our first year, and for our second year and our second season, we plan on updating the studio, getting better mics, fine tuning our audio, and continuing to do the amazing amount of research that we have shown you guys in episode 1. So, do you guys have anything to say before we move forward with today? Jones put together a special episode, and we told you guys it was a heist.
It is a heist.
It's a
And
heist.
it's a heist. This podcast, we're going to retell the story of the maple syrup heist, which occurred in Quebec, Canada in 2012.
You know, Dasher and Dancer and Prancer and Vixen, but do you recall the most famous maple syrup heist of all? Jones,
I
tell
don't,
us.
I don't know that we got a whole lot of information about that in Texas, but certainly in the upper states in Canada, this was a well followed case. So while we don't approve of crime, this story is genius, and the mastermind behind the plan was pretty brilliant. But first, we're going to have to talk about golden sweet syrup that is harvested in the spring from the maple trees located in a swath extending from the northern Midwest states in the United States, and they cross north through the Canadian border. So that swath includes the eastern United States of Vermont, all those up in there on the East Coast. Vermont is the largest producer in the United States of maple syrup. Wherever there are maple trees and a frost warming cycle that goes back and forth, one can make syrup. So even places like Japan and New Zealand can make syrup. It was made by the indigenous tribes, and we have records of maple syrup being made as far back as the 16th century. Making of maple syrup is a multi-step process, and the process is repeated annually. There's a few larger producers, but there are also smaller family operations that produce local syrups, kind of like these new whiskey and craft beer operations that we're seeing all over the world. The mass production may be efficient and faster, but it really is a mystery to be able to sit on your porch or by your fireplace and wrap your hands around a special glass of whiskey spiked with maple syrup, or to get up in the morning and find your pancakes drizzled with sweet maple syrup made in Canada. Our syrup that we buy at HEB or off the shelf is not true maple syrup. Y'all got any questions so far?
I just have an unpopular opinion. I do not like maple syrup.
What?
It's so sweet.
Well,
Like I
yeah, it's
just
syrup.
I know, but it's too much. I can't. It's just not
Oh,
my like, I've used it like doing cinnamon rolls, where you like dip the or cover them in maple syrup and then put like brown sugar and I like it in like even maple syrup cookies and stuff like that, but I don't like it like on my pancakes.
Okay. So, so you're not a purist.
I'm sorry guys. I'm not a maple syrup purist. And
you're
it's nothing
such a
against you,
European.
Canada. It's nothing against you, I promise. I love Canada.
Okay.
So
A
European.
few facts. Quebec has 7,000 syrup producers and 70% of the worldwide market. The production is around 10,000 barrels each year, the market price of $18 million. In the 1960s, the Federation of Quebec Maple Syrup Producers was formed, and 77% of all maple syrup producers joined that organization. The goal was to maintain the quality, to ensure a fair selling price, and maintain agreeable business practices.
So is it
So
kind of like a union?
it's more like OPEC,
Okay.
the oil producing energy countries that have stockpiles of oil in case we ever run out of them. So that's the same principle. We have stockpiles of maple syrup. And if they ever get low, we can go into the warehouses and pull out some maple syrup and keep the price of maple syrup constant.
The emergency maple syrup stock
The
goes
emergency
missing.
maple syrup stock. Absolutely.
The
And
maple
the
syrup.
Depression
Re-
of
yes,
2065.
that's crazy.
So the Federation has storage facilities and they maintain a constant supply of maple syrups in reserve. Those are those 10,000 barrels I just told you about.
So it really has its own economy around it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's the biggest export out of Canada, I believe.
Right, I think so too.
So, based on supply and demand, the reserves come into and out of the warehouse facility. And up until 2011, there was an annual inventory of the barrels. So for over 50 years, nothing upset the balance of the industry or the balance of the 10,000 barrels. What came in went out. The only blip in this system was when small producers challenged the business practices of the Federation. Producers had some question. How much were they required to store in the warehouse to meet their individual quotas, to meet the supply in lean years and the demand in good years? What was each barrel put into the Federation worth? Was the price to vary paid to producers each year? Were there fees and admin costs to join the Federation? And were those fees paid out of the quota price or not? And what fines might apply if someone chose not to join the Federation. So, in around 2011, small producers who had decided not to join the Federation or ended up forfeiting their membership did so because they believe in a free market economy. And they continue to this day to fight their right to do as they please with their syrup. And originally, back in the 60s, when the Federation was formed, 90% of them were in favor of a free market system. And so 40, 50 years later, they still don't have that. That 10% which have supported the Federation have been boycotted, slandered, and even 3 of their facilities have been burned on their private property to the ground.
Oh, did they hurt the maple syrup?
No, the maple
Oh,
syrup,
okay.
it was in the sugar shack. Okay, and I'm going to get into what sugar shacks do.
Wait, I have a question. So do you think a barrel of oil is more expensive than a barrel of maple syrup? I mean, a barrel of oil is about $80, right?
I don't know. I'd have to look it
I
up.
mean,
And we
Why
know,
would you know that? What are
because
you
my
doing in your life to know that?
because my
well,
family is in the
because
oil business.
Oh,
we follow the oil market in our
Yeah,
house.
yeah.
And so we always pay attention to what OPEC's doing with the price of oil. It certainly fed our family during those years that my dad worked as a geologist.
I was picturing like you just buying a barrel of oil from like someone in a parking lot and being like, "Oh yeah, we're all set this winter."
Have you seen that episode of It's Always Sunny though? Because that's
Yes,
yeah. Okay.
that's what was in my head.
Okay.
Okay,
Moving on.
moving on. Maple trees store starch in their lower trunks, and before freezing weather sets in, the starch converts to sugar. You're going to have to do a consult with Breaking Bad and Walter to understand the chemistry behind that conversion, because I don't. So the sugar rises up the tree trunk during winter and during the freeze thaw cycles, just like when you were to freeze a Coke, it gets that dome on it and it expands its volume. So the syrup expands and goes down, expands and goes down, and that acts like a filter. So that is the first step in a natural filtration process. The tapping, which is where we see on TV, they tap that spigot into the bark of a maple tree, that begins in the spring. It is perfect timing when the nights are below freezing, but the daytime temps hover around 50 degrees. That is maple syrup harvest time. So they drill the spout into the bark, they attach a spigot, and they start dripping the syrup into a bucket. There is nothing high tech about it at all. The trees live about 300 years. So once you have a good stand of maple syrup trees, you have got an investment, okay, for 300 years. It should support your family. And if you're a smart guy, you're going to be replacing trees with little trees all the time. So the buckets are taken into the sugar shack. And really, it's a tiny little building. It's got heat into it. The syrup's poured into cauldrons, heated, poured back and forth until the expected quality is achieved. And then it gets separated by color. If you request white syrup, you're going to get white syrup. If you request dark amber syrup, you're going to get dark amber syrup. And the only difference is the taste.
I was gonna say, like, the lighter the syrup, probably the less flavored and
Correct. You know,
syrupy.
and so some people like it really heavily flavored and other people don't.
Well, maybe I
So
should try light maple syrup then.
I think maybe you should.
Of
Okay.
course you should. You're from Texas.
Shut up.
Once it gets processed in the sugar shack, it gets put into barrels and it goes off to the Warehouse Federation. Okay. Are you with me so far? In the 1980s, when production was decreased, the Federation sold barrels out of the quota to keep the market stable. And individuals lost income during that time. So, those who can remember the Federation being helpful to them and increasing the prices and keeping the prices maintained, they can really and still do support the Federation. But as everything revolves in the world, things always change. So that sums up the workings of the maple syrup business, okay, until August of 2012. And a formal complaint to the police is reported of the theft of maple syrup barrels. Interesting crime. Was it eaten? Was it shipped out of the province? Barrels have no tracking ID, no GPS tracker. Where'd the missing barrels go?
Wait, so
To
were
the
the whole
tune,
barrels missing?
correct.
Okay.
Did they check the local moose population?
Exactly. The missing barrels had a total of $18 million. Okay, a significant heist and a significant missing maple syrup.
That's crazy.
I know. So the police mull this crime over, and they've never had a crime like this before. They put together a team of 250 investigators, and those investigators went out and questioned anybody that had anything to do with the maple syrup
Okay, wait.
business. So,
So
okay,
I have like studied Canadian murder cases, and like Robert Picton got away with murdering like 50 women in his pig farm, yet when the maple syrup goes missing, they assign 250 investigators to it.
yes,
Oh, okay. Okay, cool,
you
Canada.
you You have to understand that this is their main source of income, okay?
Yeah, we don't
Don't
care.
So
mess
not
with
only are
Canadian
people
syrup.
making money, but the government's making money too.
We don't care about the people. We care about the syrup. It's all about the syrup.
So they uncover several people who might be suspects, might not be suspects. And the police had no suspects in the beginning. So after several weeks in which they went through the barrels which contained syrup and which had been drained and refilled with water. So that's how they come up with the number of missing barrels and the amount of $18 million. One of the clues during the investigation was that some barrels had black marks and rust marks, which indicated water on the side of the barrel, indicating that they'd been moved by a forklift. And then, as they opened those syrup barrels, they found water had replaced the syrup. So when you walked into the warehouse, all the barrels were there. Okay. It doesn't look weird at all. But when you start looking at the barrels, you find that there's some black scuffs on them. You can find that the paint doesn't quite match the other barrels. So the making of barrels for maple syrup is a process, and they are coated and treated with rust-proof paint. Rust-proof paint. They are all exactly colored the same. They're made with a ledge around the barrel, and the forklift can come up and put its forks under that ledge and lift it out and off the stack. The stack is probably hundreds long, but it's about 6 tall. So they open the doors to warehouses, and they're 6 tall and 100 lengths of barrels in a warehouse.
Okay, so so originally they stole actual physical barrels and just took them out of the warehouse. And then when the police go in to investigate the warehouse, they now find that other barrels that are still there are now have been replaced with water.
Correct.
Okay, I'm with you.
They decided, the investigators decided, okay, well, let's go look at the records of people who rent forklifts. I thought that was pretty good because maybe they could find the forklifts that had made the scuffs and the marks.
Wait, but wouldn't
And
they
what
just use the forklifts that were already in the warehouse?
they did not, and I think that had to do with they would take a barrel out and then return it the next day or something along that line. But
Oh, okay. I'm like,
they didn't want the forklifts to be obvious.
okay,
However, the investigators found this guy, a man who had rented a forklift, and he was a legitimate driver for the syrup industry. But the question is, why had he rented a forklift? And what's going on in the storage facility?
A forklift driver for the industry had rented a forklift outside of the company.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, that's sus.
That makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So each barrel, the stainless steel barrels that they use prevent mold growth. They have a shelf life of 2 years, so they have to rotate the barrel to assure freshness. And again, I'm going to point out that they're painted with a secret batch of color. Okay, so it's not like you can go to Sherwin-Williams and buy a quart of silver
okay.
because that's not going to work because it's specially made for the syrup storers.
So that's kind of how they kept track of their barrels. It's almost like a branding your horse.
Well, yeah, and you could look up the heights of the barrels stored, and it would be quickly evident if something was out of line, right? If they're all painted the same color, and all of a sudden one's bright white as opposed to silver white,
Right.
you'd notice that something was wrong really quick. Does that make sense?
Absolutely not, but that's okay. Does it make
Maybe
sense
this will
to you, Johnson?
I think what she's saying is the color of the barrels was just like each batch is painted a different color and they're like lined up together, but they noticed stuff was missing was some of them were like scuffed and whatever.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so they painted all of the barrels the same color by batch, and that's how they tracked them, but they found out that they had been tampered with if there was scratches or forklift marks around the bottom of the barrel, right?
Yeah, I think it was just the color isn't really relevant to the story, the color of the barrel.
Okay, it's more that the scratch marks
Yeah,
are the clue.
yeah.
Okay.
Actually, the barrels that were returned were not the same color as the barrels that had been decided on for the color
Okay.
for the Federation for umpteen years.
Okay.
So it would
Okay,
both. Got it.
Yeah, so they're slightly a different color and they
correct.
got or forklift
Scratches on.
marks. Okay.
Right, right. Now, did we get to Avic Caron?
No.
Okay.
The last thing you told us was
Did I
that
tell you about
the guy with the
tasting the
guy.
forklift that
Yeah.
they investigated.
Okay, so then they started tapping into the barrels or opening that little hole on the top and tasting it to see if it tasted the same. There was some syrup that didn't taste the way it should have. Let's say a dark amber syrup didn't taste like a dark amber syrup because it had been thinned out. And I don't know with what it had been thinned out, but maybe water.
Paint
Um,
thinner.
paint thinner. And so I just don't know. I realized, and as time went on, and as they got more and more into the summer of 2012, the inspector found some empty barrels. Okay, so now there is definitely something up.
So were
So
the
they,
empty barrels the same color? They had just came in and just emptied it.
I don't know that for sure. I
We don't know
think
if they
they
were
were empty.
swapped or emptied, but they were
I
completely
think they
empty.
were swapped.
Okay.
I think I think they were swapped, either that or they were emptied out. And well, no, if it was empty,
They probably just emptied
anyway,
it.
they probably just emptied it. Yeah. So the final list of people that the police investigated were, the first one is Avic Caron. He did not have a background in the syrup business, but he had purchased a large warehouse in Quebec. And the Federation needed more storage space for syrup barrels, and a contract was made between the two of them. Caron had been indicted on insurance fraud in the past, so he has a criminal record, and his name came up in the system.
So they
Okay.
let this guy that's known for fraud, like, oh yeah, we'll rent our government property out to you.
Apparently so,
Okay.
because I think they were plain flat out of storage.
Okay. They're like, let's go ask the Canadian mob.
That's pretty much it.
Well, then I feel like it's their fault. Okay, keep going.
The second person was a man by the name of Richard Vallier. He was a trader and a seller of excess maple syrup, and he was through the black market. That trader and seller, he's known as a barrel roller. They have a specific name for this guy who buys on the black market. So he bought over quota syrup and sold it for the producers. So the producers still put whatever their quota was into the barrels in the warehouse. All he did was whatever they had left over, he would buy it and then sell it in America or on the black market.
Oh my God. How do you buy black syrup, maple syrup off the black market? It's like, is it like the syrup like on Temu?
Maybe. I don't know how it was packaged. I don't know if it was in great big barrels or if it was in little tiny maple syrup bottles.
Oh. Well, I mean, if
So
it's
weird.
anything like drugs, you're gonna sell the whole barrel, right?
Well, it depends. I mean, I
Who needs a whole
guess.
barrel?
Well, because then
Well,
that
and
person can separate it out and sell it bottle by bottle.
they could.
Because
And
the more
and you know,
people that are in the middle, the more middleman there are, the more money that's made.
so you've got the producers that are doing what they're supposed to because they're selling their barrels, their quota barrels to the Federation. but they're always left with some leftover syrup. And Richard Vallier would buy their syrup for a increased price, right?
Right.
And then sell it on the black market for an increased price.
Right.
The third person was Raymond Vallier, the father of Richard. So they were in cahoots together. They initially found a guy named Sebastian Jutras, and he was employed by the Federation, and he was a truck driver of syrup that had been sold in the government market. Okay, so he was legit.
Okay.
The fifth person is a gentleman by the name of Etienne Saint Pierre, who lives outside Quebec in New Brunswick province. He had bought and sold from small producers for years and was licensed in his province to buy and sell. He has never had a contract with the Federation. So each of these people served time. The least amount of time served was probably Etienne Saint Pierre, and he was put under house arrest for 2 years, so he was unable to do business.
So basically, like, he got the lesser sentence because he did have a
He did have a license to sell.
license. Okay.
He
And
had
then
no contract with the Federation.
Wait, so why was he arrested?
yeah, how did
Well, good question, because he was buying and selling, and they said he was selling to the black market. And he said, I'm not selling to the black market. I'm selling to people who want syrup.
yeah, I'm
so
like,
That's a good argument.
it is because I'm like, syrup isn't illegal. Like, it's not illegal to sell syrup.
right. And that's what he said, except the Federation has
Rules against it.
control, controls over everything now.
So if
They
I were to go to
dismiss.
Costco and buy maple syrup and I started distributing it, could I get in trouble?
Well, I don't think you have a license to distribute,
Oh my God. Who knew that
but
maple
I don't
syrup was
know
like,
such a commodity. I don't
yeah.
know whether in the United States you have to have a license to buy and sell, but my guess would be yes.
Oh, I thought
Since
that Pierre,
Vermont,
the last guy, was in America. No, he was in
no,
He was in New Brunswick. Okay.
But he
So
did
they're
have a license.
all, but he did have a license, but they're all in Canada.
correct.
So I bet the law in Canada is probably different. Like here in America, you can probably make and sell maple syrup.
Well, I don't know. Vermont, we could probably go to the Vermont Maple Syrup Producers Board and get an answer to that question, because selling Vermont syrup would be no different than
Right.
selling Canadian syrup. So I
I
would
wonder,
assume there's some rules in place.
yeah, I'm gonna like Google it. Is it illegal to sell syrup in
He
Vermont?
left again.
Legal to sell what the fuck, dude? Maple syrup? I'm gonna get into the maple syrup business. Maple syrup.
She's back.
So they served time, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were fined
Well, why did the other people get arrested besides the insurance fraud guy?
because they were barrel rolling the syrup that had been taken out. They weren't just barrel rolling excess syrup, they were stealing and selling Federation syrup on the black market.
Oh, all of them?
Yeah, all five of them had
And they were
some
kind
tie to it.
and they were all kind of working in cahoots. Like one guy was a driver, one guy was
Correct.
okay, one guy
Correct.
was licensed, and so they're kind of
Right.
towing
And
the
they
line.
had a bunch,
Yeah.
they had a bunch of burner phones that they would say, there's a shipment coming down.
Oh my
and
God, this is crazy.
I know, all that kind of stuff. So at the end of the day, everybody served time. Some of them had fines, and they're all out of prison now. So I assume that the Federation has a close, tight watch on their maple syrup barrels. Now, this is also kind of weird, not weird, this is sad. So there are a number of small maple syrup producers, and they have chosen not to be a part of the Federation. And they are now getting fined because they're not selling their syrup to the Federation.
Right.
So this case went up before the Supreme Court in Canada, and the small producer won because they wanted, and the Canadian government wanted, a free market system. And then the Federation and all of its prosecutors and all of its legal people took it back to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court undid the ruling. And as far as I can tell, everything's back to normal in the maple syrup heist. But somebody made $18 million because
So
their
have they ever
fines
found
sure.
the money, or like the guys that they arrested and
Well, who stole the syrup? How did they catch
Well,
them?
it it they set it all up and they investigated all these small producers and they started seeing, burner phones, and they started tracking phone records, and they finally tied these five guys together. Now, I would assume that Eric Caron still has that $18 million because he was the mastermind.
So was the forklift guy not involved?
He was. And he got, let me tell you, I'll tell you in a minute, he got 8 months in jail.
Okay. So the little maple mob guys did it together.
Yes. And they say that this is as close to a cartel in Canada that's ever been, I guess, investigated because of the amount of money stolen. Or the amount, it's not that the money was stolen, the amount of syrup stolen that made them $18 million.
so did they ever
Wow.
find the money?
Nope, not that I'm aware of.
I feel like hashtag worth it. Like you served house arrest and made $18 million?
Well,
Right.
or a portion of it, because there were five of them.
Wow. Okay, so I looked up the law in Vermont, and the law in Vermont states that it has laws how businesses can use, quote, the term maple to even promote and sell product. The statute prohibits companies from labeling products as maple or maple flavored unless they're truly made with pure maple syrup. So Vermont's 6% sales tax applies to retail sales of tangible and personal property, which includes much of the equipment and supplies used to produce maple syrup and products. There are sales tax exemptions available for some items, but not all. So I guess if you're a maple syrup producer in Vermont, you obviously have to meet how much actual syrup is in the product, and then Vermont takes 6% of that sale.
All syrup is 100% syrup that is put into the barrels.
Okay, so maybe like
The
in
grades, the
right
grades are based only on the color.
color.
All quality is the same.
It just says that it prohibits companies from labeling products as maple or maple flavored unless they are made with, yeah, you're right, pure maple syrup. So 100%
Pure maple
maple
syrup,
syrup.
they're
Okay.
100%.
That's
That's
probably just a false
crazy.
advertising thing.
I know because
And it
like
may very well be.
I've
I mean,
heard
that
that
would,
like wasabi is really just like dyed horseradish, and that we don't actually get real like avocado oil is made out of like the bottom of the barrels of like coconut oil, and they like say not to buy or use avocado oil because that's not what it is. It's like something that's bad for you.
interesting.
Yeah, so I
I was at the store the other day looking for syrup and I was like, why do all these say pancake syrup? I just want maple syrup.
Because pancake syrup is not maple syrup.
it's
Well,
probably
now I
just
know.
like sugar cane, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or like what is Cairo? Like what is oh, we just
Cairo's
read.
made from sugar cane.
Yeah, actually we looked it up while you
That's
were
molasses.
breaking. Yeah, and we looked up how they make like what molasses comes from, and it's actually from the burn off process of making maple syrup.
No, it's from
Interesting.
sugarcane.
Yeah.
Syrup comes from trees.
Right, but didn't you say that that maple syrup is the burn off from the or
Molasses.
molasses is the burn off from maple syrup, the production of maple
No,
syrup? Oh,
no.
no.
Molasses is from sugarcane. Maple syrup is from trees.
Okay. All right. So Cairo and all of that shit is just cane sugar
Yes.
products. Okay. Or corn
Hmm.
syrup.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Cairo is corn syrup.
Right.
Okay. All right. Well,
And that is the end of the story. I thought it was a genius story. I mean, it took them really months to figure it all out and to figure out, and it was such a simple plan. You take a barrel out, you trade it out, or you empty it and you sell it on down the black market. You send it on a ship into America and bottle it, or even if, I mean, maybe they bottled it there before they shipped it out of the country or
yeah.
into a different province.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
ask, like, did they ever say how they did it?
Yeah, I was gonna
I guess
say,
it
did they
was,
ever
like, what, a
explain
barrel
it?
at a time?
Well, it was a small operation. So, I assume that we had some Federation people in on the paycheck because they
Right.
had to have a way to forklift and to move those barrels out of the warehouse.
And was the warehouse like, did it have cameras on it?
Not in the beginning.
Oh my God. You just have $18 million of product and you don't even have a freaking camera, like a $20
Well, way more
Right,
Polaroid
than
camera.
that, because they didn't steal all the
Oh my
barrels.
right.
God. And they don't
All the
have like full
barrels.
security?
Not that I read.
That's
Now
crazy.
I have to tell you that it is very difficult for me to read French. And
Yeah.
most of this reporting was in French. And so I did get a lot of it from I read about the maple industry and all of that, but the actual crime is a Netflix original called Dirty Money. And there's an episode in that series about the Great Maple Syrup heist.
What they did is the forklifter took, let's say, I don't know, maybe a barrel to a few a night, put them on the guy that drives the truck, gives it to the son and the dad that are
Barrel rollers.
distributors, yeah, barrel rollers, and
And then
then
the warehouse
and
guy.
then yeah, the guy at the very end who was licensed to sell excess but was selling the
Yeah.
excess for or
So they all would have received a piece of the pie.
right. Even at what,
And the pie
18
was
mil?
18
Yeah,
million.
so you're getting about what, 4 or 5 mil a person?
Well, if they divided it evenly, you know,
Yeah. Would you
I
go?
mean, I
What
would
was the
think that
highest sentence? So they're all out. So nobody got more than like 10 years.
nope,
So would you serve a couple of years in jail for $4 million?
that's the question.
Absolutely. I'm in.
I'd do house arrest.
You're like, I'll
House
take house
arrest
arrest.
sounds even better, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, seriously. Yeah, I would say worth it. Like, sorry, but
Also, Canadian dollars are worth more than American dollars, so
That's
ooh,
right.
yeah. So I bet they got like 6 or 7.
it would be a pain
So,
to try to launder it all, though.
Yeah, I wonder
yeah,
how they laundered it.
I
Or
don't know.
did the government like so the oh wait, it's never like the money's never been recovered
Not that I can tell.
and the government's just like, "Oh well."
Well, they fined them, so they probably had to use some of their
Oh, money to pay restitution.
money to pay some of the fines.
Yeah.
But even that, until I mean, I can tell you what the fines were. I have that written down somewhere, but I think the most fine was like $6 million or something. So,
Well, so you take that off the top and now you're splitting 12 mil.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I feel like people made money and people got hoodwinked and people felt really, kind of embarrassed about all of this. And they're still fighting the fight.
What
Those
is
small
this all about?
Yes, and the
Oop.
small producers want a free market. They want to be able to sell their maple syrup to whoever they want to sell their maple syrup to.
Yeah, I knew that they were trying to break free from the Federation, but I didn't realize that it was like you said, this is like a cartel.
Yeah, yeah. I think when Vic Caron kind of got involved, it it brought the shady side out. Because he had figured out how he could make money, and if they'd gotten away with it, they
Who
would have made a
knows?
lot of money.
Yeah, who knows how much they
And
could
if
have
it
made.
and if it had continued.
Right, that's what I mean. Like if they
Oh,
had
you know what?
continued that operation, then
Canadian jail is much nicer than ours, so yeah, I'd take the jail.
And they probably serve maple syrup with their pancakes.
And then you go to the guy next to you in line, like, I made this, like I took this is my syrup.
Oh my gosh. It also reminds me, I was just listening to a podcast series I've been listening to recently, and they did the Barbie and Ken, Kenneth and Carla Homolka, and Kenneth
Right, right.
Bernardo. And, he made a shit ton of money smuggling cigarettes back and forth between Canada and America. So
Wow.
that's how he made a living, flying under the radar, was selling cigarettes back and forth over the border.
Interesting. Interesting.
Hmm. All right, guys. Well, I thoroughly enjoyed that story. I mean, nobody was hurt, and I just think that it's clever and funny and a really fun Christmas story. So we hope that you guys enjoyed it as well. I hope that we have all of our episodes. We have one more episode of Darley. We have this episode, and I hope that I have Death Row out. And that will conclude our series and our season for this year. And then we will take a small hiatus at the beginning of the year just to get ahead on research so that we are more organized going into our second season. We have been speaking with a member of Darley's family who has come out and made her page public. And her name is Danelle, and you can go look at her TikTok at Fugate, Fugat 1982. And you can look at her talking directly and answering questions directly that you might have about the case. Like I said, I've also started doing videos on my TikTok, and you can also ask any questions through me, which I can then give to Danelle. But she is fine with us announcing that she is advocating for Darley's innocence, as we hope her appeal is in the process. And I hope that by the beginning of the year that we'll have a date, hopefully, for Darley, and we will see how the story plays out. But in the meantime, we'd really love for you guys to check out Danelle and her TikTok, because she does get into a lot of information and answers a lot of questions. And she's cleared up and fixed mistakes in our podcast, which we will include in episode 8 for you. It sounds good. Well, we hope you guys have a very good holiday, whichever holidays that you celebrate. We hope that you have a good one, and we hope that you guys stay safe and warm and cozy and lovely this Christmas. We will see you in 2024. Bye, guys.